no way that they're going to withstand wind like that. Here's a before and after shot of the big blowdown in the boundary waters. And again, this area here would have sustained winds of about 120 miles an hour, we think, for 20 minutes. And that was accompanied by 4 to 7 inches of rain. So these derechos have the highest rainfall rate of any storm in the world, any type of storm, way higher than you get in a Pacific Ocean typhoon. And you've all seen them, those storms where everything just turns to a gray fuzz, and then 20 minutes later the sun comes out and there's debris all over. You've all seen these storms. And this is our data from the storm on mortality of trees. This is just chance of mortality, and it shows here that these are the late successional species maple and cedar and ash. And these are the early successional species, jack pine and aspen. And it turns out that even at the same size, this is diameter of the trunk, 30 centimeters is about like that. Even for the same size, a cedar or a maple is far less likely to blow down than a jack pine. But jack pine and the aspen are the two main tree species in northern Minnesota. So again, if these severe winds start occurring up there, it's going to take those out very quickly and allow maple and oak to take over and replace the boreal forest. So that's warming and some of the direct impacts it has on changing storms and fires. There are also other things going on. Global warming is not the only thing going on. We also have a lot of deer. Way too many deer in a lot of places. Any of you who are trying to grow oak trees in your woods know that it's almost impossible to get oak trees to survive the deer. They come into town and eat stuff in people's gardens. The population per square mile is just a little bit too high. And in northern Minnesota right now, in the far north, that's not the case. It's too cold, but with a warmer climate, this high deer population could move much further north. And they are capable of really destroying reproduction of white cedar, yellow birch, white pine, and the oaks, which are just the species that would do okay in a warmer climate. So unfortunately, it's a complementary list. Some species are sensitive to temperature change, and the ones that aren't sensitive to temperature change can't deal with the deer. And then we've got the worms. And this is one of the biggest stories we've had in recent years. There are no native earthworms in Minnesota. And so all of our worms are from Europe, and that's a nightcrawler, Lumbricus terrestris. And what these worms do is they eat the duff, which is the leaf litter in the forest. Did you know that all our forests used to have leaf litter 4 to 6 inches thick? It was like walking around in a mattress. And a lot of older people tell me they remember when they were a kid that they couldn't find any worms in the woods and you had this thick leaf litter. Well, everything in southern Minnesota is infested with these non-native worms, but in northern Minnesota there's still some areas that don't have them. And this is a contrast just a few feet away. This area is not invaded by worms, and look at how many species of plants and how many tree seedlings there are, and this is after earthworm invasion. Turns out that that thick litter layer is where most of the fine root systems of the plants and the trees are. And when the worms eat those leaves, worms are detritivores, they eat dead leaves. The forest floor recedes by 6 inches, and all of the wildflowers and the seedlings die. And what's really important for global warming is that this thick litter layer is a form of insulation, and it keeps the soil cool in the summer. And so when that goes, the soil warms up. And at the same time that a warmer climate is warming the soil. So we think earthworms will probably double the magnitude of impact on forests that climate warming alone would have, by stripping away nature's natural mulch layer. And they create erosion too. I mean, a lot of the flooding that you had after the big rains last August probably wouldn't have occurred without earthworms, because a lot of that rain would have soaked into that duff, which is like a sponge. It would take an extra 2 or 3 inches of rain at each rainfall compared to a soil with no duff on it. And not only that, the earthworms make a hard, impervious layer right on the surface, and that makes rain more likely to run off. So earthworms are creating major, major ecosystem change here at the same time as a warmer climate. Then we've got our bugs. Native insects play a big role in climate change also. And this is an example, the mountain pine beetle in British Columbia. Because it dies if it gets down to minus 40 in the winter. It used to do that in British Columbia, and it doesn't anymore, and as a result this bug population exploded, and it killed 30 million acres of lodgepole pine. As you can see there, all those brown pines are all dead. It's an area the size of Pennsylvania, and it's a native bug. It just got out of control in a warmer climate. And it's on its way to Minnesota, and it can live in our species of pines. You see, it can't go across the Great Plains because there aren't any trees. It has to live in trees. It couldn't go through the boreal forest through Saskatchewan and Alberta before because it used to get down to 40 below zero in the winter. But now that doesn't happen anymore, so as soon as it gets into the jack pine near Edmonton, it'll be able to run all the way to the Atlantic Ocean and take out all the jack pine in the southern margin of the boreal forest. And then it'll be able to run down the Appalachians and take out the southeast pines in the United States as well. This thing is capable of killing all the pines on the continent in a warmer climate.
All species of pine?
All species, yep. And then we've got our exotic pests. You've probably heard of the emerald ash borer, which will be here in a few years probably. And it doesn't care about climate. It comes from Mongolia. And in Mongolia, it gets down to 50 below in the winter and 110 in the summer. So this bug doesn't care about climate. It's just an added impact in addition to global warming. And orange and red on this map means areas with a lot of ash. And we do have a lot of ash in Minnesota, as you can see. And these blotches are cities that planted ash after Dutch elm disease went through and took out the elms, and then they replaced the elms with ash. And Chicago, it just appeared in Chicago. In the Twin Cities, we only used about 20% ash when Dutch elm disease came through. So we're in good shape compared to Chicago, which used almost all ash. So here's our list of things for trees. Global warming and the need to migrate north will affect every tree in some way. And there are some other diseases here I didn't list, I didn't talk about. Sudden oak death is a new fungus that came from Asia that can kill red and white oak. We don't think it can kill bur oak, but it can't live in Minnesota. It's too cold right now. In 2 decades, it might not be too cold for it. Deer, of course, can eat the seedlings of several species. The ash borer I just mentioned. The Asian longhorn beetle is capable of taking out the maples and aspens. There's some hope for this one because we've been able to contain a couple infestations of it. It's a wood-boring beetle that comes in on pallets used to ship heavy equipment. And there was an infestation in Chicago which they contained. It's a very big insect, and it has a slow life cycle, unlike the emerald ash borer. By the time you know you have emerald ash borer in one place, it's already 5 miles further. This bug, on the other hand, is a lot slower, and there's some hope that we can contain it. Then the hemlock woolly adelgid is essentially a wave of destruction going through the eastern United States. It kills every hemlock from the littlest seedling to the biggest tree. The old-growth hemlock in Great Smoky Mountains National Park is all dead except for 25 acres, which we being the Eastern Native Tree Society, of which I'm the vice president, treated with a systemic insecticide. We picked 25 acres of the best old growth with the 600-year-old trees and treated it. The reason I mention the adelgid is because in a warmer climate, hemlock might migrate into Minnesota, but it might go extinct before it gets here because of the adelgid. So even things that should come into Minnesota in a warmer climate might not get here. Then the mountain pine beetle I just mentioned, and the earthworms are especially impacting maple for us. And so here's the diagram. A warmer climate makes a longer growing season. More droughts makes the soil warmer, which can kill trees. A warmer climate also lets the exotic earthworms spread faster. The longer the summer, the longer the worms are active. Raises the deer population, and the worms and the deer can both kill tree seedlings. More fires, which can kill seedlings and adult trees. More windstorms, which mainly kills adult trees, and the pests and diseases spread faster.